right.
Well, welcome back to the ITAM kitchen. You know, the place where we always have our discussions around IT asset management. You know, that real sexy topic that we know of, we enjoy, we thrive, we go next step, and we have kitchen talk about. You know, we're still working on the recipes, so we're trying to get set up so we can actually start cooking as well. But cooking in the kitchen for ITAM is more than just doing the physical display as far as what we cook, make, etc. Right? It's being able to say, what are the ingredients for a successful deployment, successful change, successful alignment with the rest of the organization. That's what we've been hearing for months now. We started this on January 7th as a complete experiment. We've been going crazy ever since and having a blast. So put that. So my name is Bill Talbot. Mr. Bill, as they know me in the industry. 30-year practitioner, recognizing many different things. Been doing asset management a long time. I'll just leave it at that. And I say that not to be frivolous, right? Mm-hmm. And there are folks that I know have done more than 30 years, more than myself. But it's also being able to say, do I know it all? I don't. I continue to learn every day. And that's the whole idea behind our current series we have underway as far as the inherited environment. Because as you put that forward, right? As you move yourself, how are you working through things? How are you thinking about your environment that you just inherited? In this case, we gained a new job for a role. And within this role, we look and say, okay, we're hired for asset management. They said we have the skills that they want, and they look for, et cetera. And they kind of give us a little bit of a scope. You know the interview process. You've been through it. But there's more to that. What's happening? And in this case, this is about this cloudy topic. So we're talking about cloud today. That's our topic behind today. And today we're going to be doing some triage work. But before we dig into that, and Rob and I are going to collaborate a lot on this, let Rob introduce himself, and then we'll kick this right off.
Hey folks, I'm Rob Collins. I've been an IT asset management practitioner for 30 plus years, honestly, going all the way back to my time in the United States Marines, through state government agencies, to 2 of them, let's say, over the course of like 24. And then as a practitioner and as a consultant on the private consulting side for IT asset management. And with that, back over to you, Bill.
I appreciate it. Because as we're thinking about, as we've been learning in these series, it's about the collaboration in these scenarios. That's where the real value is. When you think about the value behind the conversation, how we're doing that alignment. In this case, we're talking about cloud environments. That's our current scenario we're working through. Use cloud repatriation. It's a crisis. We love it, right? Big word, little man. Anyways, the whole idea behind this was we're doing reverse cloud. Everyone, this organization went to cloud, like 90% cloud, 10% on-prem, and they say we can't afford this anymore. We've tried FinOps, it's not working. We can't get the teams online. We need to bring our data centers back because we have way too much storage we're paying for. I've seen this actually happen in real life also. And for this case, they have the tool sets as far as like Flexera, ServiceNow, Cloudability, and there's no sponsorship they've given any of those guys have given for this, actually. But what's happening is there's a cloud renewal coming up, right? And we've got to figure out how do we bring this across. And that's the interesting part behind this scenario. Rob, I mean, you and I were talking about it just a little bit beforehand, that being able to say, how can we look and further drive that, right? Because a lot of this is not unusual, uncommon today as far as working through this, right?
Yeah.
Or trying to work through this because we've just these especially these enterprises, like this one's probably 15,000 employees. There you go. These enterprises said, okay, we go cloud because that's the current fad. We did it because of COVID, et cetera, because it was easier. Well, no one paid attention to cheaper, right?
Yeah.
We're looking at cost. But what's some of your thoughts behind this scenario as we dig into it?
First things that come to mind immediately are anytime that a new technology is brought into play and you stand it up and you implement it, right, without anything out beyond that, right? There's the newness of it, you know, and the value and the sort of like the, how would you say, the allure of cost savings. That's what brought us there in the first place, right? So no matter what that new technology was, we've seen this before, we'll see it again. We move compute from on-prem to cloud and back and forth. the mainframe to the desktop to smart terminals, back and forth. Right, so this is just sort of one of the latest iterations of that. So what happened in this particular scenario, right, written up, the bill's written up for us to kind of work, to give us a focal point on this, is everybody who sold in to moving their assets off-prem to the cloud, because let somebody else deal with the hosting and the maintenance and the operation, right? Let them pay for it, take the risk and the trouble. And then we'll reap the reward and get the operational function and the storage, all of the good things, right? How has cloud been sold before to you? Here we are. Now that this stuff has moved up there are these unexpected like jumps in cost. In the discussion we had just prior to this, right, we were talking about, in this case, somebody simply forgot to switch the box off. That's it. And so it ran and ran and ran and ran. And when it did, they got a bill, and that bill was way above what they expected, and way above the norm that they had been charged, right? So given that scenario, there's a few things that we want to address, right? At the higher level, right, we want to understand, how did this happen? Why did this happen? Looking at the management level is one place to look, and so that's where we're going to be going, right? The other is down into the functional stuff. Ordinarily, when you run these things as an on-prem service, normally you have certain parameters set, like when is it going to run, when is it going to halt, is it going to save anything, where is it going to save, etc. So you could pick up those operations again, thinking in an 8-hour day, and doing that. Like all your normal maintenance activities and whatnot, they all happen, they're planned, and they're executed during those off-work hours. So in the case of cloud, when something was just running and it wasn't switched off, we have to look now at the technical aspects of, how did this thing get forgotten? Why wasn't it automated? So you're now looking at those processes as well to prevent it from happening again. But then the situation we're also talking about is not just in and around the management of it, but it's also, let's say, in the security of it and your trust in it. Or maybe you have regulatory issues that you've got to abide by, and those regulatory issues indicate you've got to have some control of it. It should be a hybrid model, an in-house model, perhaps. So the idea now is you want to repatriate these assets and you want to bring them into full control and cost within your own environment to keep them secure. The best metaphor I can think of for that is Battlestar Galactica reboot. Their ship got lucky because they weren't modernized and connected like all the other ships were, and the enemy was inside. Right. So here, and the reason why I mentioned that is because there's a modern day current cybersecurity risk involved with some of this. You have to take those into consideration and assess those as well.
Well, the other thing to keep in mind is when we started doing cloud, what most people didn't realize, right, is because when COVID happened, everyone wanted to be virtual, make it easier to access, easier to your point, lower overhead. You didn't have to put people into data centers, et cetera. So there was a lot of that, right? But that was all reactionary. There really wasn't much, and there wasn't, as we think about assessments and when we say, okay, are we ready to do this or not? There really wasn't much of a decision on that. They say, well, we've got to do it because there's no one there. Well, the reality is there's a cost to that, right? Because when you think about the cost of cloud's even increased. I've been part of outsourcing for 30 years, literally 30 years, right? And when you think about outsourcing costs, everybody says, oh, it's going to be cheaper. Is it? Right.
Is it?
Yeah. Right. And I'm not saying you shouldn't outsource. If you want to outsource, make it happen. If that's not your focus area, you absolutely should do it and be proficient in what you're working on. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But this is also the case where you have the ability to say, okay, with cloud, what happened is all of a sudden the spotlight turned on the financials, right? It's very, very, very much in the financial side. You say, oh, all of a sudden you've got to pay the bill on a monthly basis. And executives are saying, where'd this come from, right? We didn't have to do this before. We were just paying for the building. We paid for the support. We knew our yearly activities. We didn't have to do it month by month. We negotiated to see what was actually coming in the door. But the reality is, when you start going cloud, you start putting storage, you start adding to it. It goes ching, 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 ching.
Yeah, you pay for each of those services.
You do. And I mean, I even saw it I was doing part of a contract right after COVID started, probably about a year into it, literally this organization, they said when COVID happened, they said everything got shut down. They said take all the computers, just take them all home, take desks, chairs, monitors, whatever you want, and we'll deal with it after the fact, right? Going to the cloud was the same thing. Just make it happen. We've got to stay online no matter what. We have a major event happening, world crisis, and that's what happened, right? And now we're coming back saying we can't afford it, right? It's kind of like going out and buying. You want to say, okay, I want to buy this brand new car. Right? I'm going to go buy this nice Lexus. You can only afford a Yugo. For those that don't know Yugo, I understand it's old school compared to stuff, right? You get, it's kind of like saying a Ford Pinto, but
proud product of Yugoslavia, Croatia.
Yeah, exactly. But if you look at, say, you can only pay for a low price vehicle. All of a sudden you want say a Lexus or a Tesla, something like that, $100,000. You can't afford it. It's way out of your side to reach. You're going to get it started. There you realize I can't make payments, right? That's kind of what's happening here with cloud. Is they went ahead and said, okay, we don't want to do it. We're not going to pay attention to it. Make it happen. Everyone's going to work with us because it's the pandemic. They're going to give us this great deal initially because they're suffering just as much. We're trying to figure it out. And prices keep increasing. It's kind of like the interest rate increases, right? So you have that happen. So that's a little bit of the background of what we're running into with this scenario is resources have changed, environments changed, licensing's changed, your PCs, how you're looking at that changed, and now we're moving it back in-house, right? And you're talking about movement. This is a reverse movement where you just said a COVID. That's exactly what you run into. It's reverse philosophy. So from that, being able to say the executives have to make a decision. I've got to cut costs. I only have so much budget. That's all it is. How are we going to do this? We're going to switch. But behind that, Rob, what comes to mind? What are some of the surprises when we go down this scenario? Because that's important when we think about the reverse patriot. When we start going to cloud back on-prem, I'll say it that way. Repatriation. Not the easiest word in the world for me to say, but anyways, see, I just called myself out. Because when you think about this, there's being able to say, you want to do it. The other thing is, how can we make sure the team's on board to do it? And that's, I think we need to triage that today, a little more clarity behind that. Any thoughts?
Yeah, let's look at where the alarm bells went off, right? How did this happen, or how did you come to learn about it, right? Because everything otherwise was assumed to be running smoothly. Somebody from finance or financial operations comes back with the bill and goes, oh my God, check this out. How the hell is this happening? We weren't expecting it to increase in this cost. And sure, no matter what happened, somebody forgot to turn a box off, right? That might have been the issue. Somewhere, someplace, though, that discovery of the problem is what you want to get your head around. And how did it slip by? Those are the things too. So looking at the financial reports, going back to the contract and doing a full understanding and analysis of what that contract meant and how costs could have spiraled if there weren't any notifications otherwise. I would definitely want to sit down and get those stakeholders together and say, how did we come to know about this? And then how do we triage? How do we troubleshoot in the future? How do we prevent it from ever happening again? And now that some of this stuff has been done in this particular scenario, not all of it, it's not complete, we're looking for ways to avoid it in the future. And so we've got to sit down and pull some team members in and have those discussions as well.
Well, you've got that, but here's an interesting dynamic also that comes to mind, Rob, is you look where the world has gone to cloud, vendors, et cetera, right? So some of the on-prem, what used to be on-prem for our solutions are now SaaS.
Yeah.
So some of those we have to totally look at differently because the on-prem option is no longer an option.
Oh, well, if that's the case.
Consider that as well, right? Yeah.
Well, if that's the case, if on-prem is no longer an option, and I don't know that I necessarily agree with that, then you got to start looking at lower cost providers, for instance, or negotiating your service with your cloud providers. And so some of those discussions, those talks have to happen.
Well, right, but you still just think software vendors, right?
Yeah.
Let's go for the big ones. Go IBM, Microsoft, Oracle, I'd say even Adobe, right? When you're licensing, you may have the PCs. Absolutely. Adobe's probably a bad one out there. It's a little bit different whole scenario as far as that goes. But like Microsoft, how are you putting that? Microsoft, I would say you probably have a good mix. You do on-prem versus cloud, right?
Mm-hmm.
You go down the Oracle path. I'd say you're probably, honestly, I don't know where Oracle sits on that anymore, to be honest, right? Because they've gone to the cloud. You have Oracle Cloud on top of it, but where do they sit on their databases? We sit in the middleware to bring that place, because that used to be prominently where they were, right? Mm-hmm. So the question is, from a licensing perspective, is that even an option? And that's what we have to triage up front with this scenario. As the asset managers, like, let's put it on the table. We need to talk to our vendors, see what that option is. There's one, to your point, we absolutely should look at the cost internally, but we also talk to the vendors as well.
Yeah. Look, I'll speak from this perspective, but I'll tell you up front, I'm not a Microsoft licensing specialist. I'm not an expert when it comes to all of Microsoft offerings. But one thing that's in the news in the last like 6 months to, in the last 6 months especially, is you're not going to get any more price breaks on Microsoft 365. They're holding firm. They're not going to do discounts. That's my understanding. So forget it. You're not going to have any options there. You're going to have to negotiate what they're willing to do for you. And right now, it doesn't mean discounts. And now the push is for the 365, what is it, the E7 options? That basically it's just a more, it's just a, how would you say, it's just a harder incorporation, let's say, of AI into their service offering. And so now that's the talk everywhere. If you're looking in the ITAM world online, through LinkedIn, et cetera, everybody has their view of that, their vision of it. And so that's where, they are. I don't necessarily think that there's any like major decision on how to move or to force Microsoft to negotiate. But that's where you are with that vendor. So you start looking at around some of the other vendors, and what you're getting out of the cloud for that. But that's just from a software perspective. That's not really all. That doesn't consider, let's say, what you're using in hardware, which is now to the cloud, which you'd have to assess to come back. I would hope during the move to the cloud with those, somebody someplace sat down and recorded what we moved, what we shut down, why we're moving from here to there, and those costs associated with it, and why simply not turning off a box would have spiked those costs for that period of time. So two things to look at there.
Well, I was going, and the reason why I said need to reach out to the vendors, right?
Yeah.
Is we're going to do the research to figure out how we got to where we are. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Now we have to see if we're going to go to, in this case, the executive's already made the decision, but we still have to do the homework and say, I know you want to go here.
Yeah.
I know you want to go back on-prem. That's great, but some of this we cannot do. And it's the reality check. That's where
we better list out what we can and can't do then up front if we know this already. And because we know what's negotiable.
And the reason why I bring this up is because this is where we get a seat. That's where, as asset managers, we get a seat at the table. We're part of that discussion. We're not going to control this discussion, so don't look for that. Honestly, you don't want control. We're going to be providing information. That's the best thing you can. That's the best hero you can be, is we're providing information.
Yeah.
But if we can say, here's where you are today, even in the cloud environment, say, okay, let's understand cloud licensing, which is our specialty, right? And we're going to work with the FinOps, et cetera. But it's okay, so they understand what's out there. But we say, here's what can be migrated. You might find that only 50% of the environment can move.
Okay.
And that's an important part for this whole discussion is, again, it's the dialogue, right? We have to have that alignment.
Yeah.
And we've got a lot of moving parts, right? We've got 15,000 employee company. Right?
Sure. Yeah. And all the services they need to support it.
Yeah. And it's a manufacturing logistics company. Okay. So you think from that standpoint, the reality is probably most of these individuals are workers. I'm talking about they're blue collar workers, they're not white collar workers, right?
Okay, so like you got a factory environment, right? You got a manufacturing environment, and you're just supporting all that work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why do we move it?
Yeah, we have to figure out, okay, what can we move, what can we not? And the worst thing that can happen is asset management's not at the table. Is not
Yeah.
a team discussion, right?
Yeah. I mean, these are your eyes, and these are supposed to be the parts that you're utilizing to understand what you're ordering, what's in your inventory, and what you're supplying,
Yep.
and all of the things that you're, how do you say, supporting from a business angle. So, again, it's another one of those alignment activities between business, IT, and ITAM.
It's amazing how it keeps coming back. Yes.
But then also the whole thing about what you can and what you cannot act on, what you can and cannot move. That assessment that to me is just so important. So because you don't want to waste the time or the money and the resources, let's say, in something that you have absolutely no impact on whatsoever. It's just a waste. You want to figure out what you can do and apply your effort to that.
Well, exactly, and that goes back to the prioritization of this whole effort, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah, it does.
You want to move from the cloud and go back on-prem. I get it. There's all sorts of reasons why you want to do that.
Cost shock.
Well, exactly, it is.
Yeah.
Because you got the shock, knee jerk, are you going to go back? But the question is, okay, how far can we go back?
Right.
Some of them may not be recoverable. So this may be a new way to life, and you've got to say, okay, especially manufacturing logistics, if I can't save costs, how do I recover costs?
Well, let's call it applicable scope, because you have to determine that really to determine anything else we're going to go forward. So I've listed that as applicable scope, what you can, what you can't do. And then some assessment of what the value of those are.
Remember this one. I don't think they said what type of device we work with. They just said cloud.
I mean, that's the other thing too. Yeah, what is it? That's why I keep going back to what did you move and why? Because there must be somebody made an argument once upon a time, and they put numbers to that. It says that we expected to save, let's say, $10 million because we're going to move this system off-prem, and then it turns out it cost us $12 million instead.
Well, keep in mind this one also has. I forgot about this. Local business units in 14 countries. So it's a global reach. So you've got some different dynamics even on that, right? Mm-hmm. To how if you're going to do local work, you store the information, how's that occurring, et cetera. There's again, what's applicable scope. You've got to look at that from multiple different facets here. This is almost like a new project. Actually, This is a project within ITAM. I don't have to say it is a project because you have a whole migration occurring. It's not just moving from one building to another. Right? This is literally moving from one environment to another.
It is.
And making sure you have that in place, right?
So what was the guarantee then? Was the value in a central, let's say, repository for all applicable data and applications so that you can manage that across, let's say, 14 countries or however many you mentioned? Because at first you got to really look at that too. It's like, are we talking about one or a handful of facilities located in one area in the U.S.?
Correct.
Right? Because it's way different than, oh yeah, we have like mining manufacturing operations in 18 countries. And each of those now has regulations that you have to abide by as well. And all we're really looking to do is just you do your operations on site, and then to the cloud, you accumulate all of the necessary data and your measurements and your ROI on those operations from a central place. So, I mean, if there was a savings or a value associated with that, then that's why you moved it to the cloud, right? And now if you have to return some of this stuff on-prem, then you got to go back and you got to look at, well, okay, what were the costs of operation back then? Because you should have numbers on that, right? And then to determine whether or not you can return to that, close to that same cost, minus, the economic change and inflation and all those other factors, So I think that's important to know.
Well, absolutely. But this also is where it provides this is what a lot of folks don't understand in asset management. I'll say some of the new folks, right? And I want you to stay around, everybody. Yeah, I'm not saying that. I want everybody to be around.
Oh, yeah.
When you think about the task, you talk about IMAC, the life cycle, et cetera. This is a business problem we're trying to solve.
Yeah.
And that's why I want to drive out of this. This is a business problem, and you are part of the solution. And if you say, I don't know anywhere else, you know what their answer is going to be? You're not the right person for the role.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just calling it out, right? Uh, I'm a coach. I'm paid to push, and this is a hard job. And you've got to think about the business side, not just what you do day to day, right?
Yeah.
Think about the outcome and how you're supplying it, and that's the important about the triage here compared to some of those scenarios we've done the last 2 weeks, right? This is where we're literally having those business discussions, and we're going to say, I know you're not going to like this, but time out. We've got to, we need to have a discussion. I know we want to go, this is a knee-jerk reaction. I get it. But the reality is, let's get the right people here. I'll use the word workshop it, because we just need to at least have a collaboration to figure out where we are and figure out where those quick wins are. And again, this is very similar to what we've talked about the last couple of weeks. Absolutely. But we're looking from a business perspective. We're not just looking from a technology or a device or move. This is literally a whole business part that we need to be part of.
Yeah.
And if you're not in the room, I'll put it this way, you're not in the room. That's an opportunity, because this is also an opportunity for you to grow.
And from a business perspective, you find that you're bleeding. All right, what's the normal first aid triage for that? Stop the bleeding. And some of those answers aren't going to be, they're first, the scenario is not pretty. So you're already, speaking to bad news. Right. And so now they want help. Okay, great. Here's what help looks like. Here's what help costs. And you can control the bleeding and then eventually stop the bleeding. Those are the outcomes you want. So if they're upset at the fix or the cost of the fix, right? Then all right, great, use that and say, well, how can we make it better? Or what do we do to make this a little bit more palatable for the business?
And just to add more fuel to the fire on all of this, things that we are accountable for is being able to say, and to your point, to assess, to say, where are we today on how we're looking at our assets, how we're looking at our compliance position, et cetera, right? And here's some nuggets for this one. And this is not uncommon. It's like, well, we're better than that. Really? The maturity and readiness, it's a level 2. They've lost physical hardware. The expertise is gone. They never gained SaaS and outsourcing governance skills. Therefore, it's a free-for-all. Just look at, I know that doesn't happen anywhere. I can count on nowhere. Yeah, everyone's perfect. Yeah, right. Okay, what else are you lying about?
I can speak to the SaaS part of that, but it's not necessarily, the thing is that the SaaS is sort of like one of those like side effects, right? And if you're going to approach this from a governance level and you weren't controlling what people were spending on their P cards in the first place, or you had no choice but to react, then that's kind of another discussion. Unless, the only part of the SaaS thing, in my mind anyway, that's really applicable is do those services that you've purchased through cloud, or that you're working with on that end.
You know what this is driving home? It is, absolutely. But you know what, I just thought about, what this is driving? It's really cool, actually. What's happening here, because I don't see anything in this. What's in here? That's cool. It's driving the metrics you should be measuring.
Yeah, if you weren't measuring any metrics before, well, that's another management level problem. Like, why weren't we looking?
Because when you start doing that, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be painful. It's going to be kind of like ripping off an arm trying to reattach it. That's literally what you're trying to do here, right? But back, Rob, like what you're talking about, okay, I saw it as well. SaaS, you have the SaaS group. They're going to just buy something. They don't know what they have. Tell them the platform. I have those discussions too. It doesn't matter. I have a spreadsheet of information. I'm good enough. Oh, what happens if you bring on a new customer? I had another environment. I'm good. I'm doing it. Do you know what the cost is? No, I leave it for finance. Happens all the time. That's where FinOps is, how FinOps happen. Yeah.
And that's the other thing too, is finance talking, other than to say, we got this outrageous bill. Whose fault is this?
Yeah, it comes from multiple angles. And that's what I want everyone to understand. It's not just a knee-jerk reaction, one person. You've just been brought as asset management and say, I need you to look over this because you've come in as an advisor, someone with experience. How are you dealing with this, right? And now we're figuring out, okay, how are we collaborating with the team? Because you start looking at those metrics. These could be financial.
Yep. Clearly the first ones are. They'll be
operational. I mean, it could be procurement, which is sort of, I'll just add in here.
Yeah, it's an important one.
It's the topics we've been talking about every week, right? And just about every day that we've had an ITAM kitchen is you start measuring these areas and you figure out how they're relatable to you. Because you will have the whining in the background, kind of like the dog. That's perfect timing, by the way. Because you get the big yawning. Oh, I'm not going to do it because it's beyond my effort. Yes, I did say that. Because you get that all the time. You know exactly what I'm talking about out there, right? Who's on the other side of the screen here? You know exactly what I'm talking about. It happens everywhere. Well, call it out. We're going to measure it because this spotlight, okay, is sort of on me, but it's shared.
Yeah.
That's an aspect. The last thing I want to do is have myself saying, I'll own my part of it. But this is a shared responsibility, and I want to share the wealth of information, and we're all going to work on this together. It helps that team collaboration. Anyway, the people, so that was part of it, right? Process, we'll just say it's humorous. Level 1 out of 5. Or out of 0 to 5 is level 1. So there you go. They're doing something. There was no onboarding for SaaS. Onboarding is like a person working online. Yeah. There you go. Tools for technology said level 2 tools are configured for cloud. On-premises discovery is dark. I love it when it's dark. I can navigate in the dark, trying to find windows, right? And there is no SaaS management tool. So let's just add to it. Okay, what the heck? In 14 different countries, why not? It's manufacturing. Governance, level 1. Again, it's not surprising here what we just talked about, the people, the process technology. The governance is just rudimentary at best.
I have a few KPIs if you want to put them up there. If we want to go to that level of detail, otherwise keeping them at this level is fine too for the sake of moving the discussion. Financial operational procurement.
Okay, let's put that 1 second. Perfect. Because I think also the KPIs is also the last one's data. What data do we have to manage? There's very little data as well. Again, we're kind of the chaos part. I always like level 1 to 5, chaos being the very bottom, or 0 to 4, however you look at it, 5 different levels.
Yeah. Pick a scale.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not unusual to do this. We're in this scenario. Not at all, because that's why we're being brought in. Because if you're being brought into, I will also say, if you think you're going into a role and it's going to be easy street, they've had asset management, it's been in there, but you're there to fix it. Oh, cool, I'm going to flip a switch and that's it. Typically not.
Yeah.
This is actually where the fun happens. You learn your own limitations, your restrictions, and growth opportunities. I'll put it that way, because you put that. So you brought up some points as far as some metrics and KPIs. Let's help those out. I think that's a great point. What would we do? Because this is a manufacturing type environment. What comes to mind?
So let's say from a financial aspect, for instance, a couple of things that I've come up with is the cloud efficiency ratio, the measure of what revenue is consumed by cloud costs. That's one of them. Another one is going to be budget versus the actual variance. This way, those surprise factors that come in that reveal that somebody forgot to shut off a service or a switch or something like that. Right? Those kinds of things will pop up.
One more time, that one.
Budget versus actual variance.
Got it.
And then unit economics is another really good one. You should be doing this all along, and that's the cost per transaction into the cloud environment for what's happening. And of course, this is what feeds to Wednesday's session, which was, okay, so now that you've identified these, how are you going to mitigate that and prioritize that mitigation, which will lead us to the roadmap. That's all, and that'll be Friday.
Absolutely. But I love putting it up here in the triage part because it brings that level of awareness.
Yeah.
Because now you know everyone's you're gonna meet. It's like, you know what, I need some of the basics. The triage, let's understand what it is. The teams are gonna go off, come back, and they're gonna say, well, maybe I can't do that. It would not surprise me at all. They say they can't, right? But it's like, okay, if you can't, tell me what you can do.
Right. Yeah.
Right. You got to figure out how you keep that momentum going, and that's hard to do in this scenario because you're being very reactionary. Very reactionary. Right?
Let's move to another section there, the operational stuff, for instance. I've got a couple of those. resource utilization rate, for instance, for provisioning, over provisioning of those cloud instances. You really need to look at that. They're going to give you an idea of maybe you've asked too much, or you're putting too much into a specific, let's say, set of cloud resources. Maybe you don't necessarily need like the cream of the crop. You need the Cadillac. We can get by on the Yugo, and the Yugo gives us everything that we need at a low cost. It just means that you can take more budget back in for office parties and other stuff.
Well, so let me ask a question. Get a little more granular on the resource utilization rate. Are we talking about actual physical resources? Are we talking about cloud resources?
This is all cloud. I mean, I think it would be a good exercise to do that across both, like say on-prem stuff versus the off-prem, because that's going to reveal whether or not you're really getting value out of that move, and could even prioritize the move to repatriate. So if you're not seeing the value, or if you're seeing way more spend by moving to cloud, then that's one of those things where you go, oh, that was a big mistake. Okay. And nobody sitting in a CXO spot wants to admit, but a little humility might help. Plus, it's going to deliver value back to the business.
The concern I have here with resource utilization, right? That's TCO. That's basically where we're hitting on that, right?
Yeah.
Cost of ownership and the resources, right? So, and we know TCO is not easy to do in asset management. Anybody that's been doing it for a while, right?
Yeah.
We've got a low level of maturity here for this organization. We want to get here, but for the simplistic standpoint, how can we work with the simple part to say, okay, what is that? What are we doing for resource utilization?
Mm-hmm.
What can we capture? And that's an important part I just want to bring up right here. I'm not saying you don't want to go there. You absolutely do. The executives want it. It's like, okay, make it happen. Right.
we will do it, and then if you don't know how to do it, then all right, well, then let's bring somebody in, bring in a consultant. Anybody? And we can maybe help you to discover these things and then bring you to a place where you can figure out how to do it. Where that's the whole point of this exercise, really. Today, we assess the problem, determine the bleeding, and then Wednesday we go, all right, now that we've talked about these things, how are we going to be able to measure these things? How do we act on these things? And then prioritize all that for Friday's exercise to do it here, and here. Imagine
where I was going, the resource utilization rate is realize that you may not be able to do that when you look at the bigger picture. Executives say, I want to cradle to grave. That's exactly what they want. That's their job to say.
Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah.
So they need it because their job's on line. The reality is when you get down to your level, you may say, that's humorous, right? And the question is, you can't say, well, you can say that's humorous, but you can say, this is what I can provide today.
Yeah.
We can go there, but we're not going there. And there's no way we can because we're missing X, Y, and Z. It's kind of like, I was talking to somebody the other day about Aptio, right? If anybody has used Aptio, et cetera, right? Aptio is an awesome tool. It provides executive reports, et cetera. And Aptio did not pay me for mentioning any of your thing.
Nah.
But to put it in place, it takes all data, clean data to put in place, right? Mm-hmm. Extremely clean data in order for the reports to go to the executives. For most organizations, it takes a very long time for that to occur because there's dirty data sources throughout the organization. So we're trying to, all of a sudden you have all this stuff, pockets of information, and maybe there's information you're even missing, right? Because from resource utilization rate, we can look at, okay, for me, what comes to mind, just trying to break it down a little bit for the operations team, is I need to know what the percentages of the environments that we're using. Are we actually using them? If we have 200 cloud instances, right? Mm-hmm. Or I can't remember the exact, irrelevant what the platform is, you have 200 instances. Are they only being 25% used? We're paying for all the space and storage.
Yeah, is it worth it? Are you assigning dollars to usage?
Yeah. Again, I'm just trying to keep it simple for everybody, right? Yeah. That's where I was going with that. The other part is from a manpower perspective, how many people do you actually have managing it? Maybe you have an entire team and they're a little stretched themselves and trying to bring this on because they're so busy doing reactionary things. You may say, wait a minute, we've got a whole different problem, different bottleneck forthcoming to try and get reports. But I say that just from a realization perspective on the triage side, so you get to know your people and your team. And that's easy to overlook. So I love that we're doing resource utilization, absolutely, but I'm also trying to break it down to say, there's an expectation management has for that, what that means. And there's an expectation of what you're going to have for that. There's an expectation in between. And you need to make sure, to get back to the alignment topic we've been talking about, even today, you want to make sure you understand exactly, be very specific on what you mean by these resource utilization rates, what you can pull in. And you may say, I need to follow back up. That's okay, but don't take a long time doing it. Because everyone's going to push back on that.
Bill, can we put another major point in there below operational? And that's governance and compliance.
Good point.
Oh, no, step back one level back. Yeah, so under operational and between operational and procurement, I should say. Yeah, put in governance and compliance. And then we'll list a couple more for operational here in a second. And depending on how you're managing it within this scenario, within this organization, right? Because we've gone to global from, let's say, on-prem stuff, right? So where it's applicable, I'm just going to say asset discovery percentage. So that's cloud asset discovery percentage versus physical asset, right? And the only reason why is because if you're going to consider moving anything off cloud back to on-prem, right? And govern and manage that, you also kind of have to understand how much is out there and what is being, how you're leveraging that. Because I got to go back, aside from the other stuff I mentioned before, and I want to understand and justify the cost to moving back on-prem and report that to senior management so they can give me guidance on which way you want to go to address the cost of lift, if you will, or the cost of the effort.
Absolutely. And for this scenario, keep in mind that they do not have any type of tools today. So that means you probably need to purchase a tool potentially, which means you automatically have costs being incurred.
Okay. Now, focusing on governance and compliance for a minute, let's look at discover, understand, and maintain some management over SaaS shadow IT count. In other words, how many and how much have been spent, let's say, through employee P cards in order to gain this capability and what that cost is. And if it's being done and the only way you catch it is in a 30-day reconciliation of the account, or somebody's got to take the time to look at that, or you can apply AI to look at that over those accounts to figure out how much of this is this software or services that you're purchasing online and is being managed outside of your organization. There's another area too to focus on, and that's the security of it all. And then what the regulatory non-compliance risk is going to be. So for that as well, there's just a couple of points under each of those sections.
Mm-hmm. So as you're having fun with whiteboard, anyways, a lot of complexities to have in place for this part as far as working with the business, right?
Mm-hmm.
And being able to say, okay, how do we move forward? Keep in mind, we've given 180 days. One of the first things you may have to go back to as far as 180 days to say, okay, how are we going to remediate this renewal on the software? Is being able to say, okay, 180 days, we may also already have asked for an extension. and that's an exact discussion. Okay, what do we got?
Cindy's got a comment out there about thinking about how easy it is through the catalog for somebody to request. And I'm assuming, Cindy, are you talking about SaaS services? Like at Amazon, I could just point, click, need a credit card number, and bing, it's done in 3 steps. Too easy.
Right.
And no security.
That goes back to your policies, right?
Yeah. Policy and what you're going to do. Yeah, adherence. If it's a smooth process with approvals, more adherence. So if you have the approval within the process, and that's one thing, then you know about it, trust prior to purchase. That helps to bring it out of the shadows.
Exactly. No, that's a great point. Thank you, Cindy, for contributing on that.
Yeah.
That's the whole idea is what else is there in there? I mean, you hear Rob and I talk quite a bit because we've been through this in different angles.
Yeah.
Being able to say, okay, what else is there? That's the whole idea, because and that's actually a good point, is when you start writing this, you start writing the questions, you want to make sure around a tribe of individuals you can collaborate with. Don't do it in the vacuum.
Yeah.
Right. It easily becomes a black hole. I'll put it that way. Easily becomes a black hole.
Because SaaS acquisition, stuff like that, that is a place where there's financial bleeding. You're losing. You're taking some losses there. Either you're taking losses because it's not a particularly well planned or controlled product, or it's because the cost of an individual subscription, for instance, is like 3 or 4 times what you could get on a reduced rate if you took all those requests in and instead made one big request for, let's say, 50 people or 100 people, or who knows? I mean, for everybody in the entire organization. At 18,000 in a manufacturing environment, I've dealt directly with that. We have somebody that makes widgets, for instance, right? And they have like 12,000 employees, right? And you want to examine what their current subscription level is based on a tier or a series of there's a name for it, the roles. Everybody, for instance, that would require E5 or E3 or E1 or F1, because most of you are just frontline workers. You want to be informed of stuff, and then you'll go to something in order to do further interaction around pay or request of leave or an absence, etc. That's fine, right? That's how you do that. Once you figure out how many of your employees, what their needs are, and what the most appropriate subscription level is, that's optimization. Is what we're talking about there. And then the procurement. It's also,
yeah, absolutely. I'll put that. I put down review also approvals for any type of procurement purchases, right? To your point, it's so easy to do on a P card. Well, let me actually back up a second, back to governance. You also need to look at change approvals.
Tell me about that. Change approvals.
So you also have to look at your change management process.
Oh,
if you just have environments coming up and you're not looking at how it's being approved, they're saying, "Oh, just make it happen. We don't have to worry about change management." Okay, we have a little problem here, right? Management here.
Yeah, I can definitely speak to the change management perspective on that, because I did that for one of the state agencies for like 5 years. It was fun.
Because when you start thinking about that, you understand some of the idiosyncrasies involved. Oh, it's too hard, right? We hear it all the time, right? And being able to look at that. What else got you?
Cindy's got a really good comment around that. The other thing is ensuring catalog is mature to handle ownership changes, spin ups, spin downs for usage. If it doesn't, that's when you want to sit down with that working group and tell me everything that it takes to do this. Let's say in the dev, test stage, prod environment. So that this way you can get a complete handle on everything that you're doing these actions in within a production environment. And if you'll tell me that, I'll look at my catalog to make sure that the CMDB help is appropriate to these actions in an operational space, and that you've got all of those proper actions like within the system, so that you can handle change management properly, all the changes. Your standard changes, your emergency changes, and then your other changes.
And when we say this, it's also being able to, this is cloud as well as on-prem.
Yeah.
This, right? Old school was like, okay, we're going to do on-prem only. At cloud, some folks, it's like, okay, we're just going to ignore it's cloud. It's not going to impact as much. But we have to make sure it does include both all environments. We're talking through that. Because when you start to understand that, you might understand more you may not understand some of the, how I look at it. When I look at change management, let me back up.
Mm-hmm.
When I look at change management of the process of organization, I look to see how things are done, how the collaboration happens, who gets involved, what the approvals occur. Look at how much detail they do in the research before that change request is approved. By understanding that, what do you think I learned?
Well, you learn how they do it, then you learn where you can, let's say, examine those processes, for instance, to determine how long it takes for approvals. Can you work these kinds of things into that to help to control it? And especially around that, because now my brain is just going into change manager mode.
Well, it can also be when you see a change occur, it's like, wow, okay, we have this new environment we're starting to go. I never knew we procured it.
Yeah, well,
right?
You should have by then. If you didn't.
Well, you should, right? Yeah. Exactly. It's low level maturity, right?
Uh-huh.
I'm just saying, you can learn a lot just by change management and inquiry. Just
Yeah.
asking questions. And trust me, your change manager is going to love you. The entire change board is going to hate you. Because
Not necessarily. Yeah. Go
you're
ahead.
you're making them work and think, is my point, right?
Mhm.
And to update to CMDB, update the change records, be more therapeutic as far as how they're looking through it. Well, it might need therapy when you're finished too. But that's a whole different story. But that's where I was going with that is you start looking at change management, there's a lot to be said. Procurement, there's a lot to be said for that, right? You know what's coming in and out.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not saying you shouldn't look at the operational, absolutely, because change management kind of goes in the operational.
It does. Yeah, it absolutely does. Yeah. And for change management, if you have a relatively, or even let's say an adequate change management, let's say on a scale of 1 to 5, you're at a 3, right? Then you're in a good place. You know what you have because you've got good vendor contracting and approvals. You have good procurement, and if you're recording everything, then you can then you eventually load your CMDB as those things become operational. If you just work along the life cycle path, there's a lot of places where you can take action ahead of time to sort of see where you would have hemorrhaged and do some proper planning.
Yeah, because what's also going to happen is something we have in our case study here is also the CapEx, OpEx spend.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure that's about to change. That's another
Back in the
reason
financial.
we look at all of this, right?
Yeah.
It goes back to financial. How we look at down here, the below financial is going to impact above all the financial aspects, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is make that happen.
I think we got enough up there to work on to go forward, but we could expand
the entire team.
Yeah.
Oh yes. Oh, definitely.
Right.
Definitely. And that's what we want to talk about because just the collaboration today, as far as Rob and I walk through this, is because there is the expectation, then there's a reality.
Yeah.
In this case, we have to keep the finger on both, help further set expectations. Because when you set expectations, making assumptions that, okay, this is how it's going to work, realize your executives, they may not like to hear it, but they want to hear your feedback and say, it's just not possible. Now, keep in mind, a lot of executives know, I'm paid to help push you and make it happen. It's like, you can go somewhere else. I'm going to go somewhere else if you want. That's okay. That's your call. But I'm just saying, right now with the team, you're going to have to fire an entire company for us to get this back on in place. We're bleeding ourselves to death right now because we did not manage it up front. And the point's not to slap anybody on the hand, but more just the dialogue. Right?
Yeah. And just getting down to it. Look, if you identify that maybe things weren't handled the right way in the past, fine, accept that. Determine what you need to prioritize to manage going into the future and then put a plan together and move forward. You'll prevent much of this if you do that.
I think part of organizations, I'm sure you have too, but Rob, is that, okay, we're going to cut the budget this year by 4%, the entire company.
That's every day. That's every year in the state.
Right. So we're always going to cut costs.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the thing is, you're going to cut costs. However, the cost for your software, it keeps increasing. So how do you manage the two, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not about resource headcount either. You don't have it. You've already cut the resources, right? You're going to go back on-prem. We need to change something here, right?
Well, you just basically set a perfect scenario for folks like us who love to solve puzzles, right? You have a constraint, and if you can begin to do some predictive analysis around this if you put those metrics in place. If you do that, then from there you can go back in the other direction and go, all right, so what are the areas here that we can improve or that we can decrease the cost on so we can meet that 4% objective within a year, but try not to terribly impact the triple constraint around because we're already talking about the cost, right? So we're talking about time and quality are the other two factors, or just you pick it, triple constraint applies, So where are you willing to accept some loss along the other two? Or where could you potentially increase one, decrease another? You could increase quality and efficiency, right? And you can decrease the cost. There are some opportunities for that, and these exercises sort of bring those things up.
It does. And it also brings up potential outsourcing too.
Right? Potential solutions in the form of outsourcing. Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
If they could do it cheaper overseas.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
There you go. That's another good comment. And that's absolutely right. Cindy brings up a really good point. If you're going to bring that over to the team, and your big cost savings before was you canned half the team, well, all right. In order to solve this problem, you're going to have to hire some team in or do a hybrid solution around that team and AI application.
Well, exactly. You're leveraging you're figuring out how to use technology a little different, right?
Mhm.
Your outsourcer may be able to do this. You may have a different product to do it. But my point is, there's cost to be able to make these changes occur. It does not. Everyone says, "Oh, we're going to reduce our cost by 5 or 10% of the overall budget." Well, that's great. You're already deficient on tools. The processes are in place. Your systems are a mess, right? I'll just put that word. Right?
Yeah, it's like that.
Your compliance report is just not non-existent. We've heard that in this scenario, right? And you're still expecting to reduce costs. Really? where is my question to the executive, and I'll be flippant about it, right? How long have you been in the role? Right? And were you here when this all happened when we went to the cloud? Yes, I was. It's like, okay, so why didn't we talk about this before with it? Yeah. Again, I want everyone to keep their jobs across the board, even the executives. Yeah. But it's also about being a reality check. That's what we're talking about in this place, right? That's what makes these scenarios, inherited scenarios, a lot of fun, because, like Rob said, and Cindy, you're in there. I got to see you, and Randy. We're all on the same boat, right?
Yeah.
We love challenges like this. Is it easy? It's not. But it's actually where you got the collaboration. We figured out. Do we get headaches with this, and sometimes migraines? We do. But that's also where, from a gaining visibility within the environment, that's what we're paid to do.
We love this stuff.
Not to ding anybody. Yeah,
we're passionate.
This is our DNA. Yeah, this is what keeps us going every day, and that's the fun part behind all of this. And hopefully you understand today, which is time to summarize, because we're at the top of the hour. It's awesome. I love it when we have dialogue like this.
Yeah.
With just triaging, this is what came to mind. These are areas we have to focus on, right? Team members we need to include. And maybe, again, we have 14 different countries. Maybe there's additional dynamics behind this, okay? It could be operational, it could be financial, it could be all sorts of things from the executive. Maybe you have 5 different CIOs in 14 different countries. I don't know. Think about that, right? But being able to say, how do you work through this? How do you think of this objectively? Because you are part of the business in this scenario. Because this is a political, it's not political. This is a organizational change. I don't know where political came from. You're trying to avoid the politics, you're going to see politics too.
Oh, no, you're right, though.
Yeah. But there's a governance, this is overall change to the organization. And when you look at this, you've got to think about who are the players. And if you think about what you do typically within I'll say a typical type of implementation for asset management, you're not looking at it quite like this. This is something newer for us, newer, I'll say the last 2 years. Mm-hmm. But have we worked with things like this before? Absolutely, right? Whether it's manufacturing, it doesn't matter which industry. But that's where the fun is, because when all of a sudden that light bulb comes on for the rest of the team, because here's what's going to happen. You're going to talk about finance, operations, governance, and procurement. Say you have 20 people in the room. You might have 200, I don't know, right? Mm-hmm. You have that collaboration. Say, here's where I need you to focus on. You're going to hear shouting, screaming, no, it's not possible. We have time frame. I'm going on vacation. I'm not going to worry about this until I get back. I'm going away for 3 months. It's like, that's nice. I need this in 2 weeks.
Nobody likes change but a wet baby.
Yeah. I love that. Especially a wet sauce baby. Sassy wet baby. That's oh wow. Okay, so you can see where my Monday is. With that, as we wrap this up, this has been a lot of fun doing this. For our viewers, any type of wrap up that you want to put in line for this, what we've covered today, because this is a little bit different than we've been talking about the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's like so many things too. If you're coming at it, let's say from a consulting angle, or you're stuck with the job, you have to deliver the bad news. Just I would say, get the information together and just be really direct and be prepared for some contentious conversations. Like, because in some cases, it is going to be political. It's like, well, they made the decision because it was popular to go to cloud, so we did it, And now all of a sudden, we fell into one of the pitfalls, and our finance team came running in with a surprise bill, with expletives, showing how to deal with it. So it's like, okay, that's why we're here. We find problems like this and we say, all right, well, everybody cool your heads, cool your jets, and let's sit down and let's look at the problem. And that's what this exercise is about. And for those of you out there doing it, you should be pretty familiar with this by now. And if not, now's the time. Cloud cost optimization is huge right now. So get in and get educated and start working in this area.
Well, and on that note, optimization's always been the end thing to do. Just people, it goes in spurts. Being around the industry, nobody talks about really optimization really until the financials get a little tight. It weaves in and out, right? It's like a roller coaster in the economy. So when the economy really gets bad, asset management, software asset management, even configuration management become more prominent, right?
Yeah.
And when you think about that, it's like, if you've not been involved with this, great, you've been on the outside, you've been in the background, you haven't heard about this, that's awesome. But the reality is, this is real. This is real, right? These are the folks you talk to. These scenarios are real. We've made it up to protect the innocent, so we have a good flair to it. But at the same time, being able to provide that insight to say, what do we need to think about when we walk into these scenarios? That's the whole idea. We're going very different scenarios the entire time. So this is week number 3. This is just the triage. So this is day number 1. Day number 2 is going to be stability. How are we going to stabilize? We have some great framework here to start from. And from there, be able to further refine to say, okay, who else do we need to talk to? What do we need to do? What's the next step? So we can get that 30, 60, 90-day plan and put it in place, because that's what we're talking about. Yes.
Cindy's got a comment. It's a really good one, especially on exit of this session. And she says, without strong enforced governance, none of it matters.
Yep.
You're right.
Yep. Well, so I will say strong, enforced, and aligned governance. Let me say it that way. I'm gonna add a line in there too. It's easy to say, okay, you're going to be a hammer. And Cindy, I didn't take it. You weren't meaning that. That was probably implied. By default, we implied that. But it's also being able to say, okay, we're actually going to make sure we're aligned, and we're going to have to sometimes agree to disagree. And that's a hard thing as technologists for us to sometimes understand. We look at facts, we have facts, and push those forward. In this case, this is a conversation. It's almost like a negotiation. Actually, part of it is a negotiation.
It really is. Yeah.
And you're going to learn how to deal with conflict. You're going to deal how to deal with people. You're going to learn how to deal with different scenarios. You're going to deal with unknown factors you've never dealt with. To us that are seasoned, this is our life. I'm going to go back to that. This is what we enjoy and thrive. So thanks everyone contributing. It's been really great. And start back up on Wednesday. I'm in the mode. I'm doing great. See everybody, and I will see you then. So we'll start about stability again on the cloud repatriation. I said it, crisis. There you go. See you then, guys.
Thanks, everybody.